What if saving your marriage didn't depend on your spouse changing first? In today's episode, we have a marriage coach who shares how one person's decision to grow can completely transform a home. From disconnect to connection, from stress to purpose. This episode will give you more hope again about the power of one choice to change everything. Stay tuned. Welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm Kendra Nielsen, wife, mom, and licensed therapist. Do you ever feel like you're doing everything right, but you're still exhausted and empty? Did you think life, marriage, and parenting would be simpler and more rewarding? Sometimes you just want to crawl back into bed and lose yourself in screen time and chocolate, rather than face that personal or family stress. You are not alone. This podcast helps you break free of the rat race and build a richer, more meaningful life, flourishing incrementally and realistically, improving your mental health and wellness, and living with deeper purpose beyond the mundane, no matter where you are in life's journey. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest here with us, Baucom. He's a marriage coach who believes something most therapists won't tell you. You don't need your spouse on board to start saving your marriage. For over 2 decades, he's helped thousands of people in hurting marriages discover that real change begins when one person decides to stop waiting and start acting. So thank you again so much for coming on the show with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about it yourself.
So my background is training as a therapist. And that was at the end of my training. In fact, writing my dissertation, when I read an article, this was back in the 90s, about this new profession of life coaching. And I turned to my wife and I said, this is how I do what I do. And so she said, what are you going to do about this as I'm writing my dissertation? So I finished the PhD. And I was already doing that approach anyway. And then I immediately did training and coaching and pivoted away from the therapy world in many ways, just because I'd seen the effectiveness studies on marital therapy, and it was a little disheartening. So I was trying to find what would work better.
That's interesting, because I was looking into life coaching before that too, and we're never really sure if it was going to be a trend or if it's going to be something that stayed. And I've been told that I'm more directive sometimes, which is more of a coaching thing.
More so coach.
I definitely know what you're saying. You only have so much time, or solution-focused brief therapy, so something brief and getting it done. You're definitely speaking my language. I can understand the benefits really of both, but I get what you're saying about coaching. So you went to this realm, you have the education and all this to back it, and then you went into life coaching pretty quickly.
Part of what you just said is part of my frustration. A lot of the training in therapy is you've got to be neutral. And my belief when you're working with couples is that you need to be pro-relationship. And that is until you see what can be done in the relationship. You know, I always talk about if I go to a doctor and I got my arm hanging at this really weird angle and they look at it like, that's broken. Did you want to do something about it? I'm there because I want them to fix that. And that's why people go to therapy, to see what can be done. And then they have this neutral place. First, I was already going, I'm pro-relationship, but let's also figure out what can happen within that. The second piece is the other piece we mentioned, that directive piece. I believe a lot of people are struggling in relationships because they don't know how to have a good relationship. They need a roadmap. So if all I can say is, how do you feel about that? Can you tell me more about what happened there? They're stuck because they don't know how to get past where they are. And so part of what I kept trying to do was to find ways to help people actually have a roadmap, to find ways of actually moving forward. And that's what ended up being kind of the first thing that I created to save the marriage system.
That sounds incredible. I love how you focus on that pro-relationship part. That is, you're right, a difficult aspect of therapy is I almost feel sometimes that it's more trendy or popular to be a little more passive instead of being more assertive and directive and helping them in ways that would most benefit them. I love your analogy too. Tell us what you see often when you work with clients, with couples predominantly. Is that right?
So actually I work on relationships, but I work with whoever shows up for that. I have a basic rule, and this is going to click us back into a therapy issue, but a basic rule is that in order for me to see people, they have to be willing to move forward. That doesn't mean they have to be willing to say, I'm in this regardless, but to be able to move forward. And that may be one person. It may be two, but that's the ground rule. If I've got a couple in, they are both ready to make some action to move forward. The reason is because I had a lot of times when I would see someone dragged into therapy and they were there begrudgingly at best, which meant that they would often try to prove why this wasn't going to work. And all they were doing was building their case stronger. Now in front of a professional, the person who's supposed to know, they're building their case stronger against how it can't work forward. And so it actually ended up being counterproductive. As I watched it, I would just watch this distancing that was happening right in front of me. And so I decided that I would work with whoever was ready to move forward, which was the advantage. You can't do marital therapy with one person. You can do relationship coaching, though, with whoever wants to show up.
So you've been doing this for a while then, and are you starting to see some patterns emerge of these main things that people are coming to you for that are stuck points? If you were to put those in just a few of them, what would you say to that?
Yeah, so let's back up and I'll tell you what I think is the core problem that gets marriages in trouble. And then we can point to the fact that when people are coming in with a complaint, it's often a symptom of this core problem. So let's track back. Couples get together, find each other, are connecting, attracted to each other, and put a lot of energy and momentum into that. And so they build up their relationship, and at some point they go, let's make this forever. For life anyway, right? That's the kind of the vows they're walking down for. And so they make this vow to be in this relationship for life. And then they go to do that. And I'm not saying this happens the day after the wedding or even a month after the wedding or 6 months. There's not a time, but there's a point, and it's not a stage. It's a point when they go, okay, we've got this. Now we need to do whatever, parenting, career, sometimes both, deal with aging parents, all these other things. And so they're like, let's hit the pause button. And it's not a conscious choice. They don't sit down and say, let's do this. It's just, it happens. So they subconsciously hit the pause button and think that they will get back to their relationship when whatever. And they have this momentum coming in that feels like we've got the love. We've got this already nailed down. And I know that because I did a lot of premarital work, and I would ask the question, why do you think you're going to beat the statistics? What is it that needs of that? And they're like, oh, we've got the real love. We've already got this beat. We don't have what happened to these other people. We really have love. And I would see the same thing happen with them because they thought they had it, so that would take care of itself. Now we'll do these other things. Relationships have only two paths. They're either growing and expanding or shrinking and dying. Hit the pause button, you're shrinking and risking the death of the relationship. So as they go on, thinking with the best of intentions, we'll get back to us after, and it's always this point in the future when the kids are out of diapers, in school, out of school, on and on it goes. When my career is at this point or this point, and on it goes. And they're building in the habits of disconnection instead of the habits of connection that they spent all that time building. They're changing those habits to habits of disconnection. So then you see the symptoms. So when people come in, they often name these. They're fighting about money or parenting or sex or something, and they're all symptoms of that disconnection. So for me, watching even the symptomology, I'm just going, okay, let's track back. The disconnection happened. And what's important about that is both people are part of that process. I think there are two different ways it happens, but either way, they end up in both people paused in the relationship until one of them goes, this isn't good. I'm finding my connection somewhere else.
What about those couples that they feel like, hey, you know what, we're around each other a lot, we get plenty of time together, but it's not that. Like they're arguing, yeah, we have all this quality time, but they are still not really feeling it. What would you say to them?
A lot of times I see them say they have time together, but it isn't actually quality time. They're having conversations about the kids, about the schedule, about these things, but they're not about us like it was when they were getting to know each other. And so there are 3 levels of connection. And when I start talking to them, I realize that what conversations they are having, if they're having conversations instead of just sitting on the couch together with both people having a device out or something like that, if they are having these conversations, they are often missing these 3 areas. So just go through them and then we can, because that actually helps create some targets for people who are disconnected. So the first one's physical connection. Physical connection, when I say it, people are like, oh, you mean sex? And my response is no, but yes, that is one way. But there are lots of other ways of being physically connected. So any loving touch. Clementine, my puppy, is beside me right now, and she's sleeping, but she likes to be up against me because that's her understanding of connection. I'll be up against you, and that's connection. Same with humans. We know it at a basic level from being a baby, that hold, that just being held is part of that feeling connected. And so any loving touch, that's when it's, yeah, sure, sex, but also hugs, kisses, hand holding, pats, all of that. That's nonverbal. The second one is emotional connection. And that is nonverbal and verbal. Because we're sitting here talking and you seem to be in agreement with me as you're nodding your head. That's a nonverbal way of going, yeah, I get that. That's the nonverbal part of somebody being able to say, okay, you're looking at me, you're attending to me, you're responding to me. I feel like we're in this conversation. But the other 2 pieces are feeling like you get each other. I get you, you get me, and I support you, you support me. So those are 2 big pieces of that emotional connection. If what you're talking about is what did the kids do today? What was your schedule? I've watched this happen where people are like, how was your day? Oh, I had this meeting and this meeting. There is nothing other than a calendar repeat on that. And so when they do have interactions, it's often around painful points. What's going on with money, disagreements on parenting. It ends up being conflict points. So that's a verbal, nonverbal possibility of connecting emotionally. The third one is the one that a lot of people miss, and yet it is the heart of where people often fell in love, and that is the spiritual connection. When I say that, people are like, oh, you mean religion? And my answer is no, but yes, that is a piece because your religious beliefs, if you have them, carry part of your core values. And so we're really talking about that core value piece of what's important to me. What do I dream about? What do I hope for? What do I fear? What did I learn along the way of life? Where am I at my deepest level, the deepest part of myself that I don't reveal to everyone, but I have this person. And so back to that premarital work, I kept hearing the same story from couples where they were really attracted to each other and they were really liking each other, but they fell in love over this conversation that often was a late evening into early morning, a long conversation where they talked about how they grew up, where they've been in life, what they're hoping for in life. And it's basically like you fell in love with who this person really is at that deep level and where they want to go. And you also get the place of going, wait, I want to go there too. Or maybe it matches in our trajectory of where I see us heading. And because people often don't recognize that as another level of connection, it's not surprising that they often had that conversation way back then, a few more times along the way, and they stopped having it. And yet those deeper part of ourselves is so important for being truly known, being accepted, being at that place of connection. And the fact that it changes over time. What I wanted in life when I had that conversation with my, at that time, girlfriend, I was 21, and that's changed over the years. And so for her too. And so if we're not having that conversation anymore, we don't know where we're thinking and what's important to us. And so that whole area is just lost for lots of couples. That's the disconnection points, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual.
I like how you break it down into those 3 where we can do a self-check of where are we at with physical, emotional, and spiritual. And that you do put that spiritual aspect in there, those core values, which are so important. Do you find that those shift, like you said, do not the way that you were before, but core values, do you feel like those things even shift?
That's a great question. And the reason it is because if your core values truly no longer, core values, not just what do you like and what's interesting to you, but your core values shift to the point where they're opposite, that is a substantial problem. It doesn't happen real often, though. A lot of people have said to me, I think our core values are a mismatch, and I'll talk with them. They're really not. Maybe they have different views on how you get there, and sometimes that, for instance, these days might have some political overtones to them, or even religious overtones to them, that where one's become religious or unreligious, that there are some shifts there. But when we get down to what are the core values, they often match, if it's a true mismatch. And I'll go on a couple of them. One of the questions I would ask the premarital couples is, what are your thoughts about children? And I was a little surprised how often they would say, we haven't discussed that yet. And I'm like, that's a core value piece. You can't have to do that. There's not a way of meeting in the middle on kids. You either want kids or you don't want kids. There's some of it that's not in your control, but that's a core value difference. There's some more that are very different. One that kind of jumped out at me years ago was I had a couple in, and I thought we were having this normal conversation, and I said, what's the problem? And she said, I just don't think we can stay married. I'm like, why? And she said, I'm married because I wanted to have a husband and us to be in a monogamous relationship. And I said, oh, and what is your thoughts? And he said, I'm ready to bring in another wife. That is a core value problem. He believed in polygamy. She believed in monogamy. You can't meet in the middle on those. And that had shifted for him. So they could not find a way through that. I could have told them at the end of that conversation, there's no way around that. If that's truly where you are, if this isn't just like this, I'm thinking about this, but if this is really where you are, there's not a way around it. These days, sometimes politics really at an extreme they really have some pieces of seeing the values of what's important to be very different. But generally speaking, when people meet each other and fall in love, they have very similar core values. Generally, those core values are things that stay with them in some degree. Maybe which one is most important changes a little bit. The bigger ones are like, where are we going in life? And here's the thing that I believe we all live in a paradigm. We have a way of seeing the world, and our paradigm changes, but we don't notice the changes because we're inside it and looking out. And so we think we're seeing the exact same thing we have forever, and yet it's shifted. And so a lot of times as the paradigm is shifting for us, if we're not talking about what's important to us, the paths diverge on where we see us going in life. And then suddenly we're like, what do you mean you want to do that? I thought we had agreed on this. And the agreement, if it had ever been discussed, was years and years ago.
So my next question for you then is, with that, say a lot of our listeners have been married maybe many years or with someone for many years, and one of them will be like, yeah, it's good, and the other one will be like, I just feel really disconnected, and the other one will be like, what? And with my clients, I've seen both. Like, you think the guy is totally oblivious, but a lot of times it's not that way. Like, they're so tired of being number 3, 4, 5, 6, and just feeling just tired with this monotony and this life of just barely being a footnote in the family life, and it just gets old. What do you say to these clients, or how do you work through these struggles?
Yeah, and so part of that is, I think that you boil that down to feeling lonely in the relationship, not just like you're alone in these points in life, but you're lonely because you don't have that connection. I start with the core belief that we humans are deeply connecting creatures. We are going to find that connection somewhere. And so if it's not happening in a relationship, we will find it through maybe over-involvement in kids, over-involvement with friends, with work, with colleagues, with relationships outside of marriage. All of those are attempts to fulfill that missing connection. And they sneak up on a lot of people, which is why sometimes one person's, I'm good. They're getting it somewhere. It's not in the relationship. They're getting it somewhere. And the problem is it's often in a safer zone that it feels being vulnerable in this relationship again, because now we have these disconnections and these habits of disconnection. And so it feels safer to invest in other places because you can walk away from that, for one thing. But in marriage, it is the place where that is potentially the highest point of connection in adulthood, and I believe as a healthy one it is, then that is stuck. And so many times it's the I'm good because I'm getting it elsewhere. Sometimes it's I'm good just because I'm no longer in that habit of connection, right? It's not like they're getting a lot of connection anywhere else. They're just floating along. And either way, part of what the person who is ready to make some action can do is start reconnecting, because we're in such need of connection. Many times, if you bring it back without overwhelming it, which is the big problem I see, people try too much. But if we bring it back slowly, bringing the system back online slowly, the other person doesn't even recognize sometimes that's what's happening, but they're attracted to it because we want that connection. So rebuilding it slowly is often a way around the immediate response of I'm good, don't get near me.
Lee, do you have any examples of that personally or otherwise where you can reconnect in small ways without running too fast and something sustainable?
So let's talk about some mistakes that people make, and then we'll get around to what do you do. This is where I see people go, oh, we're going to do date night. We're going to go away for a romantic weekend. We're going to do like a couples retreat. Those big things that are too much connection for a disconnected relationship. And there's the pursuer-distancer dynamic. So I call it the chaser-spacer dynamic. The person goes, okay, I'm going to work on this. And so they start chasing their spouse. And if you chase somebody, go back to my dog, if I go outside and chase her around the yard, she just runs around. She's staying as far away from me as she can. If I attract her to me, if I invite her to come over for a treat or something, that's a whole different process. Because now she's, oh, okay, the game is over. And so the question is, can we pace ourselves instead of chase? Can we find a pace point? We name those 3 areas. And when people say, okay, so tell me, what do I need to do? And my response is a little bit more in those areas. And it can vary so much because of where an individual person is. It's part of why I created the Unpause app, so people can say, okay, where am I and what is a little bit more? But let me give a couple of examples of how to do that. Instead of date night, which is we're going to get dressed up on Friday night and we're going to go out and it's going to be all romantic, and the other person's going, I don't know what you talk about. Don't want to have the pressure of that. Something like, hey, there's a new sandwich shop downtown. I was thinking about going in and grabbing a sandwich. Would you like to go with me? That's, first of all, impromptu, right? It's not a big thing that's coming up. Second, they can say, no, thank you. And even if they say no, thank you, you still go, well, that was nice to be asked. There's a warmth to it, just the connection glow that comes from that. And there's a possibility that they go have that sandwich. It's not a long commitment. And so you're trying to not go solve problems or have deep conversations, but start a new habit of connecting. So this is a small piece instead of the big things that people want to try.
I like that. I was just trying to think of some things that I've done with my husband that are more memorable. I think recently we did it. Something out of the norm, mixing it up, is one of the things I value very much is novelty, something new and different, adventure. So we went and we took a ceramics class together, and it was so much fun. It was like 2 different date nights, but just laughing, being playful, just like you talked about, not doing the part where you're talking about the pain points, the problems, or the schedule, because if you think about it, I think most relationships could say, probably 95% of communication is one of those things. Or hopefully not that much, but it seems to be that way sometimes. Thanks for joining us for this inspiring conversation with Lee. If this episode left you feeling hopeful, take the next step toward a more fulfilled life by exploring fulfillmenttherapy.org. And if you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. It's one of the best ways to help our mission grow. I'll see you back here shortly for part 2. Hey friends, if you enjoyed this episode, a quick 30-second share can help someone else find support and help this podcast grow. Leaving a review on Apple Podcasts boosts visibility and keeps the show alive. Your simple acts make a big difference. I'll see you back here each week for more life-changing episodes.